Hey everyone, welcome back to What Aperture. So as you know, or you may know, I'm filming on the A6700. I did that video about the little Ulanzi fan to keep it cool because these A6700s sometimes have a bit of an overheating problem. And someone asked me if the A6700 would actually be good as a streaming camera, and they wanted to know how bad the overheating was. So as it's the first question I've really been asked on the channel, I thought I'd do a little not very scientific test, see what results would come back, because it's interesting for me as well. I want to know how bad this actually can be for overheating. So I did the test, I took some notes, we're going to quickly go over that and see what came out and see if this really is as bad as I thought it might be for overheating. And I'm sorry to say, I think it might be. So basically for this test, I just did a quick little test. I put it on the desktop little tripod that's on now, next to my computer in my office, which has zero airflow. That was a cold day, it was only about 17 degrees centigrade, so by all means, if it's going to overheat at 17 degrees centigrade, you know, you're going to struggle when it starts getting hot during the summer. So I did a test for 25 frames a second, 50 frames a second, and 100 frames a second, because obviously I'm in the PAL area. If you're in the NTSC zone, you'll be doing 30 instead of 25 maybe, and 60 instead of 50. Shouldn't matter a huge lot of difference. I'm going slower, so if the results are bad for me, then in theory that's even worse. So what did we get then? Well, if I look at my notes here, at 25 frames a second, we're using the XAVCS codec for all of it. At 4K, 25p, or 25 frames, or whatever you want to say, on 140 megabits a second, 422 10-bit color. After an hour on 25 frames a second, the camera was lukewarm. I had no overheating signs at all, and it had got lukewarm by 30 minutes in, and at an hour it was still just lukewarm, it hadn't got any hotter. So I let it run for a little while longer, and after like an hour and 15 minutes, it still hadn't increased in temperature at all. So I think at least in this little control of it not being an overly hot day, at 25 frames a second, this should be fine at 4K all day pretty much. So after that I lit the camera cool for a little while and we did 50 frames a second. Now this didn't go so well. 50 frames is what I normally record in whenever I'm doing anything, because I'm a real sucker for this nice motion blur and you just don't get it at 25, so I like to do everything at 50 frames a second. But at 50 frames a second, 200 megabits a second, 422 10-bit color, the results were pretty bad, I'm afraid. So basically at about 27-28 minutes, the temperature reading light came on the screen, the warning that I was getting hot, and by 31 minutes, you know, between 30-31 minutes, the camera switched off due to overheating, and that's not good. It wasn't a hot day, the house wasn't warm, I wasn't doing anything like really strenuous on the camera, it was just pointing at a white wall, it wasn't trying to do autofocus or anything, it was just flat recording at 50 frames a second, overheated after 31 minutes. That's pretty bad, I think. So then we moved on to 100 frames. This was again in 422 10-bit, 280 megabits a second, and this was even worse. The warning light was on at about 18 minutes, and by 21 minutes the camera overheated and shut down. So you're definitely going to have problems with the A6700 if you're trying to record in 100 or 120 frames a second for any amount of time. So I don't think a lot of people that's going to be an issue for, but people who maybe are doing, I don't know, sports videos or something like that, who want to get that super smooth 100 frames or 120 frames, don't buy an A6700, that is not going to work out for you. Even with the fan on, I don't think that's going to keep up. I have seen some other people's tests where the fan did get them a little bit of extra time, but it still overheated at 100 or 120 frames a second. So if you, for some reason, want to run a A6700 at 100 frames a second for long periods of time, well, it's not going to work. Just don't go there. Okay, so we know that just recording, even without a monitor or anything, that the camera gets hot at 50 frames and 100 frames. So we moved on because the question was specifically about streaming. He wanted to know if this was a good streaming camera, and the answer I think is no. The problem that I've noticed with the A6700 in the studio, if you can call this a studio, is that when you plug in something with the HDMI cable to run an external monitor, it gets hot really fast. I'm talking like 50 frames a second getting a warning light at about 15 minutes sometimes here. That's without a fan on it. So I assume streaming would going to be just as bad as that. So I did a streaming test. I went on Discord and streamed at 4K, 25 frames a second, 18 minutes. That was coming up with an overheating temperature. 19 minutes, the camera shut off. So that's without a fan. Now, if I was going to use this as a streaming camera, that's not good enough, I don't think. But you should be able to get around it with a fan. Now, I've got the little Ulanzi fan that I show in the video running on here at the moment because I'm just testing it out because I haven't used it very much. But a few months ago, before this fan even existed, because I didn't want to get them stupid suction cups, I bought this fan. So this here, if I can get to focus, this is a different type of fan that I've not seen any reviews or anything on the internet. But it looked decent to me, and I didn't want to spend 80 quid on the Tiffin fan, which needed a special cage, or spend a load of money on the Ulanzi fan, which needed bloody rubber bands to keep it attached to the back of the camera. So I gave this a shot. I thought this was a battery-powered fan. It's not. You have to power this all the time, so I'm a bit of an idiot. But you run it through USB-C power, and if I hold it the right way round, would probably make me look like less of an idiot. But basically what you got here, the little fan has a little plastic frame. It comes with 4 of these. You get one for the A6700, the ZV-E10, the ZV-E1, one of the Nikon cameras and one of the Canon cameras that have a little frame. So you just pop the fan into this little frame, and then this just clips in the back of the camera, and it's pretty good. I've never had any issues with it falling out or anything. It holds in just as well as this Ulanzi one does. So I've been using this in here for a couple of months, and ever since I've been using this, not only have I not seen a temperature warning light on the camera, it certainly hasn't shut off, and this is at 50 frames a second, and when I stop doing the filming, the camera is completely cool on the back. This fan is excellent. That's like a thermal fan, big metal plate on the back of it that just sucks all the heat out the back of the camera. So this is really, really good. I'll find a link on Amazon or something to show you which one this is, and at some point I'll do a proper review of it. But obviously this isn't much cop if you want to go walking around and everything, because it needs that external power input. You can't rely on it like you can rely on the Ulanzi fan. So for most of the time I'm still going to say get the Ulanzi fan and not this one. But if you're in a studio like this, or if you want a live stream, then I think this is going to do the trick. I cannot see this overheating at 25p streaming with one of these, because I've used the A6700 in here connected to a monitor with the HDMI port for hours, and it's not even getting remotely warm with this fan attached to it, and I see no reason why it would with the Ulanzi fan attached to it either. So although this hasn't been the most scientific test, I didn't see the point in really going into it any further, because we can see the results straight away. A couple of degrees isn't going to make any difference here. It's struggling with temperature at medium frame rates of 50 frames a second in 4K in 17 degrees controlled, like remote, relatively controlled environment. So on a hot day, 30 degrees or something like that. Unless I've got a funny unit, then no, I think the A6700 does has a pretty bad cooling problem, but you can fix it. I've just had a feel of the camera now. We've been talking for a while, and with this Ulanzi fan on there, the camera's not getting hot at all. The body barely has any warmth to it. So you can fix most of these issues, but if I were to buy a dedicated streaming camera, A6700, I just don't think that's going to be the one. I'd be, depending on the budget obviously, but I'd be more inclined to look at an FX30 or one of the bigger body cameras, just because they're not got these problems. I mean, the FX30 is the camera that I'm eyeballing at the moment for the future, because I can rely on that more, and you don't have to worry about external battery powered fans and stuff. That's all internal. So if I wanted a dedicated streaming camera for 4K, definitely, unless you're going to buy the fan, which does pretty much sort the problem out, unless you're going to have the fan attached to it, don't get the A6700. On its own, it's just not going to do it. And all these tests were done without a cage or anything on. It was just the actual camera, nothing plugged into it at all. No, just nothing. It was only the camera. But putting a cage on it isn't going to make a lot of difference. You've got a little bit more dispersion maybe for the heat, but it hasn't helped me in here. I always have the cage on in here, and before I started using the fan, no go. That was still getting hot at around 19-20 minutes and shutting down after a while at 50 frames a second. So we'll leave it there. I don't want to rabbit on for too long. The tests for me are pretty conclusive. In the description I'll leave a link to Gerald Undone's video that he done just a week or so ago, I think, where he started talking about heat testing, and he described it some pretty damn well, and he noticed a load of anomalies. It seems like some of the cameras are very inconsistent. Like, for example, he had a camera, I think, that did about 30 minutes before it overheated in one test, and then the same camera went for like 6 hours or something in the exact same settings. So there's some inconsistency, but his test also concluded that for the cameras that struggle with overheating, the A6700 is basically the worst if you're really pushing this 4K high frame rate. So anyway, I'll stop waffling on. Give me some feedback on the audio, please. I'm trying something a bit different, trying to get away from the Bluetooth speakers. I've set up a little concoction here, but that's another video. I just wanted to ramble on about this heat crap for a little while as someone asked me about it. So if this has helped you, give me a like and a subscribe, please, and leave some comments. If I'm absolutely bloody useless and all this information is bullshit and my test was just awful, then let me know. I won't take offence. But I hope this has helped someone, especially the chap that asked. I hope this has helped you make your mind up. If I was you, buddy, I wouldn't be buying an A6700 as a dedicated streaming camera. I just don't think that's going to cut it. Not if you're going to do 4K all the time, unless you're going to put the coolant on it. Put the coolant on it, you'll probably be alright. Anyway, I'll stop waffling on now. I'll see you guys soon.